Donald Trump's strategy in the Middle East has put himself into somewhat of a corner. He's gotten himself into somewhat of a quagmire. He's filled his administration with people who want to go to war with Iran. One guy was dancing and shaking on the stage saying he was going to be celebrating in Tehran. The other guy was a hawk from day one. Donald Trump put these people in with the notion that he was going to squeeze and he was going to scare Iran into some better deal. This was foolhardy from jump. Any understanding of how leaders function in countries would get across to him that they had no ability, no leeway that they could give in having new negotiations for an Iran deal, seeing as it was the moderates that was able to get that deal in the first place, and that getting rid of that deal to some degree painted the moderates as fools, patsies, idiots. And now you're going to try to get a new deal. Not so much. The strategy was foolhardy from the get-go. And now Trump is in a situation where people around his administration want to have some kind of strike, and Trump himself understands that that strike could get himself into a further escalation with a tit for tat that escalates into a larger conflict. What is Donald Trump going to do? He doesn't want a larger conflict. He doesn't want a war. And yet he realizes people around him want those things. And with the recent downing of the U.S. drone, with Iran saying it was in our airspace and the U.S. saying it was in international waters, what is Donald Trump going to do? The media is screaming at him, are you going to strike Iran? Are you going to strike Iran? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? The problem here is Donald Trump has given a list of things that Iran has apparently done. And with that list, now you've added supposedly a drone that's supposedly shot down in international waters. So what indeed is a president that don't want a war going to do? Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. And yeah, the question becomes, what is Donald Trump going to do? Tulsi Gabbard, somebody who I like very much, and particularly on the issue of foreign policy, has advice for Donald Trump. If you remember, when Donald Trump got elected, Tulsi Gabbard was one of the few Democrats that went to Donald Trump. And people hit her for that. How dare you go to him? He's an evil man. He's going to eat babies. He's going to kick puppies. And you're going to go to him. How dare you? How dare you? And yet she went to him. Her point is, look, I need to get things accomplished from the standpoint of foreign policy. Now, Tulsi Gabbard comes out and gives extraordinarily good advice to Donald Trump, advice that I severely doubt he's not going that he's going to promptly ignore, but advice that I severely, radically, if he indeed does not want a larger conflict, if he indeed wants to de-escalate this, you should listen to. Ladies and gentlemen, Representative Tulsi Gabbard.
President Trump, your Iran strategy has been ill-advised and very short-sighted. You need to change course now and get back into the Iran nuclear agreement before it's too late. Set aside your pride. Set aside your political calculations for the good of our country. Just do the right thing.
I wish Trump would listen to her, but I severely doubt he will. Donald Trump pulled out of the JCPOA. Donald Trump increased the military presence in that region of the world. In addition to pulling out of the JCPOA, he added sanctions, vicious sanctions, on Iran's ability for economic output, its ability to try to sell oil, and finally increasing military presence in that region of the world. This was forecast. Last year, in fact, more than 2 years ago, when I first started this channel, if you look back at those old shows, one of the things I mentioned was that Donald Trump seemed to be ramping up pressure on Iran. Now, Trump's strategy was a pressure strategy. If we squeeze them hard enough, we can bring them back to the negotiation table. The problem is the people who were in his administration, their strategy was outright toppling of the government itself. Tulsi Gabbard has been awesome on his anti-war front, and she has been very strident that this strategy that Trump is using is going to lead to to bad ends, and that's putting it mildly. I've made the point on this channel that there were going to be two outcomes to this. The first one is outright failure, and outright failure can even mean a war from that standpoint. Or, well, let me say it this way. There's no strategy in which Trump... I'm trying to say this in a way that kind of makes sense. Donald Trump was willing to shut down the government for, 30 days, meaning people not getting a paycheck for all that time for a campaign pledge. On top of that, the migrants, the automatic strikes in Syria without any evidence, it doesn't come across to me as he's the type of person that would allow his ego to take a hit, even if it means the damage and horrendous things for other people. On this, though, this is a mass scale, and this is something almost of a campaign pledge that he said he wasn't going to do, meaning he was going to de-escalate in these areas. He was going to be the guy to get us out of wars. I didn't vote for Trump. Lord knows I didn't. I voted for Jill Stein. But the one thing that I hoped for when he got into that office was he, in fact, was indeed going to de-escalate and was going to be the person who got us out of wars. And at one point he said, we're getting us out of Afghanistan, we're getting out of Syria, we're doing all of these things. He even complained that he felt one time after the next that he was forced into a situation where he would have to do airstrikes. It was automatic, not something that was contemplated. He just felt he had to do it based on the political winds. Well, you've ramped up pressure in Iran. You put a mad dog in one position and a lunatic in another. You have allies like Israel that has an outright apartheid state. And you have another one, a lunatic, at the helm of a totalitarian religious maniac regime that the UN said was responsible for the death of Khashoggi and that has beheaded 30-something people. These are your allies. Both of these allies are willing to fight to the last dead American in order to get rid of their regional foe, Iran. You have amped up pressure, and now you have a situation where one of the drones that you were likely flying over that country was shot down. You've given a litany of things that they were responsible for. Here's one other thing. So now the press looks at this and said, you've threatened them, saying you were going to obliterate the country. And in this situation, to add to the other things, was a drone that was shot down that everybody agrees was shot down, including Iran. They said they recovered pieces of it in their ocean space. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? It sounds like Trump is trying to de-escalate. He's backed away from this ferociously, saying it was a mistake. It was a mistake. Somebody who shot off was loose and stupid. It was a mistake. It was a mistake. He keeps saying it was a mistake, which makes me feel like, or makes me think, he at the very least understands where this leads. You strike Iran, you have no idea their response. And if Iran responds, you, by definition, have to respond. There is no president on this planet that would allow themselves to be hit and not respond to it. Meaning, any response by Trump at this point, to some degree, leaves things open as a dubious outcome. And one of those outcomes may be a situation that he has said was not going to take place. Meaning, he wasn't going to get us involved in a larger conflict. He was going to be the wheeler and dealer, the guys that can make deals without wars. Well, wheeler and dealer, what you going to do? You're going to make a deal without a war? Or are you getting involved into a larger conflict in that region of the world when you're supposed to be bringing us out of those conflicts? If Donald Trump attacks Iran, his presidency is over with. I think he knows that. I hope he knows that. I've heard people argue there's no wartime president that's ever lost an election. By the same token, the moment that the press turned against Vietnam War had to end. The press is against Trump on this. The world is against Trump on this. They think he's bogus. And the media, for the first time in my lifetime, have questioned whether or not what the president is saying in that region of the world is accurate. NPR wondering out loud whether or not this is true. CNN wondering out loud whether what the Donald Trump is saying in that region of the world, meaning the ship that was hit in Japan, if it was legit. Based on what Donald Trump has said, though, he's created somewhat of a space for himself, meaning he's stuck. You've said that they've attacked one of your ships. That's what you've said. That's you. You came out with that. And now they shot down one of your drones that you said was in open airspace. You said that. Well, to be honest, they said it was something else. My point is, you've stuck. You've put yourself into a corner. How do you get out that corner? What do you do? What do you do? The world awaits. The world waits. It does sound like Trump is trying to back away from this, But military personnel has made the point that these drones are not throwaways. These drones are expensive, meaning there has to be a response. I would assert to that gentleman that he's under civilian control. He needs to remember that. There doesn't need to be a response. The president gets the last say. So, Mr. President, what do you say? Thanks all. I really think you need to take Tulsi Gabbard's advice. It is extraordinarily good advice. Iran will make no deals with you until you go back to the JCPOA. Your potential for dealing is through that little device that you've derided for the entire time you were president. Thanks.